Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Bold Explorer Live. Here we are again, another morning, Saturday morning today, the 25th of April, 9:30, and welcome along to another reading. Let's hope this is all working and I'm not too overexposed, etc. Hello to Ben Reeve. Hello to Lisa Fox, to Audrey, to the lovely Julia, to Paul Smith, to Turbo Stream, Adrian, to Fiona Hammond, to Mark Donny McLeod, good morning to you, to Linda Kane, morning. Why do I have so many problems finding the live despite setting a reminder? I don't know why there are issues. If you go to the normal YouTube, my actual channel, and where I believe it has a tab that says videos, and then it says a tab for live, and it should come up there. If you go to the actual YouTube channel itself. Rami Boo says, Julia, lovely. Did you know Richard was recording your sound test before you came on last night? We did, and that has now gone. So thank you very much for letting us know. A lot of people did let us know. There was few naughty words escaped during that. We didn't realise the microphone was on, and there was a bit of pandemonium going on. But it's all been resolved. And on the recording now that is there, it's no longer there. I should be out today doing a video and recce of Y collar, but did my knee in, so that's not happening now. Luckily, no real damage, just a knock. Oh well, don't panic. Get your knee back together first, and we'll look forward to it later on. The very lovely Candy says good morning, and good morning, good morning, good morning. Fantastic. Right. We're reading chapter 5. We've come on along with our story of Narrowboat, which is interesting. It's interesting, the spelling, actually, narrow boat there, because it's two words. But I think the modern way of writing narrow boat is as one word. And I was debating that this morning with myself, as you do when I was writing a thing going, oh, is it one word or is it two words? But anyway, I'll let you decide. We are, he's still in the yard, kitting out his boat. Old Mr. Rolt, Lionel Rolt. This chapter 5 is called the People of the Boats. During the week, I was working on the boat. I'll start that again. I'll start how I mean to continue. During the week I was working on the boat, I became familiar with all the boatmen who traded regularly along the canal. We would exchange greetings as they drifted by on their slow journeyings, back and forth between Atherstone and Oxford. And when they moored for the night at Branbury Stop, they evinced a lively interest in my progress, asking when I hoped to be ready and whither I was bound. There was a four-boat Joe, so called because he and his companions worked between them no less than 4 horseboats, and always travelled in close company. One of them, the fattest man I've ever seen, habitually sat at the tiller of the hindmost boat, and was never seen ashore. His appearances were sometimes infrequent, because they occasionally loaded coal as far north as Langley Mill on the Cromford Canal in Derbyshire. This journey, over half the length of England, included 3 tunnels, which they had to negotiate by the old system of legging. This meant lying on the boards called wings, outrigged from the boat sides, and passing with their feet against the tunnel walls. Then there were the crudely painted boats of Moira on the Ashby de la Zeus Canal, and Black Warwickshire Canal motorboats from Nuneaton. But most interesting of all were the number ones. A number one is a canal term for a boat owned by her captain, as distinct from those owned by the canal carrying companies. which are worked by paid crews. In the past, the bulk of the canal traffic was handled by these independents, the carrying company being a comparatively recent development. But modern conditions are all against the old race of owner boatmen. Possessing no capital reserve to see them through a slack spell and unable to draw dole allowance, they cannot survive the cutthroat competition of the modern haulage business. Many have given up the unequal struggle by selling their boats and their labours to one of the other companies. And so, more is the pity, there are few number ones left on the canal now, and certainly none finer than those surviving on the Oxford Canal. Old John Harwood, captain of the Searchlight, Joseph Skinner of the Friendship, Townsend of Abingdon and Beauchamp of London, the Hones of Banbury, father and son, these were fine men of the old school who kept their own boats. 3 generations of Hones worked 3 boats between them. Alfred Hone, senior, and his wife Alfred Hone, senior, and his wife of the Sillgate, his son and daughter-in-law of the White City, and his granddaughters of Rose and Betty, which was named after them. These boats were kept in spotless condition, and was only to be expected, for the owner naturally has more pride in his boat than a paid crew. All the paintwork was mopped down and the brass polished at every available opportunity, and on one boat there was a canvas sheet that could be let down to protect the varnish on the cabin sides from the sun. In addition to the customary binding of pipe-clayed Turk heads, there floated from the ram's head of the White City a long horse's tail. I've tried in vain to discover the origin of this custom, which I have since seen on a few other boats, but whatever the tradition, it has been lost in the past. The brass bands and safety chains of the stove chimneys always glittered like gold, and through the cabin doors I would catch glimpses of the beloved rows of brass knobs glimmering and winking in the light of the prized open plates hanging of the walls, of immaculate lace curtains and gleaming pans. Beside the resplendent water cans on the cabin roof stood green-painted flower boxes, planted out even, with pink and white bachelor's buttons. Often there would be jam jars also, filled with great bunches of wild flowers gathered on the wayside, primroses, cowslips, hyacinths, or dog daisies in their season. Nearly every canal boat carries a pet. I once saw an old lady at Brentford who had a great tabby cat wearing a collar, which was stalking around the cabin roof with mincing step and flaunting tail while she stood at the tiller. A dog is a more common companion, however, and most boatmen seem to find room for a kennel somewhere in the cargo space. Often, too, a linnet or a canary in a cage swings from the cabin roof or flutters in the sun on the deck. White City carried 2 dogs and a coop of chickens, while granddaughter Betty kept a pair of rabbits on her boat. When the boats are empty, there are plenty of room for children and animals to play, and on one occasion I watched a boat pass the yard with 3 diminutive children having the time of their lives on improvised swings hung from the cross-stretchers. When the boats are loaded, it's a very different story. Animals must find a precarious niche amongst the cargo, while the children are confined to the cabin. The mere landsman sitting in one of these narrow boat cabins, only 8 foot long and 7 foot wide, cannot help but marvel that this is the boatman's home, that within this tiny compass all the manifold needs of a family are administered, and that it has been witness of all the comedy, drama, and tragedy of many lifetimes. When the cabin doors are closed, the only daylight comes from a small bull eye in the roof, and the lookout forward, only a foot square, which is often obscured when the boat is loaded. Light at night is provided by a large three-cornered paraffin lantern hung in an angle in the wall. Immediately to the left of the doorway is immediately left of the doorway is the coal-fired cooking and heating stove, the space around it occupied by saucepans. On the stovetop, tea is forever brewing, for the boat people are invertebrate tea drinkers. Their teapots, like their watering cans, are usually of an original and traditional design. A brown salt-glazed stoneware ornamented with a band of coloured flowers in relief, and a white plaque bearing in blue letters some simple motto such as "Love at Home." Their manufacture is now extinct, as I found when I tried to obtain one. They were last made especially for an old lady who kept a shop on the Ashby Canal, or the Moira Cut, as the boatmen call it. The supply failed with her death and the closing of her shop. The boatwife keeps her provisions in 2 cupboards, one in the tapering stern aft of the deck, and the other beneath the deck floor. Next to the stove is another tall cupboard, set at an angle of 45 degrees to the wall, the door of which, elaborately decorated with castles and flowers, is hinged at the base, and when opened forms a table for meals. When it's folded back after use, any crumbs fall into a shallow drawer beneath, which is specially provided for this purpose. A wide bench along the opposite wall is the only sitting accommodation, and does duty at night as a side bed for the children. A second and wider cross bed, with cupboards above it and a folding central position, lies athwart the floor end of the cabin. It is usually screened by a pair of lace curtains. This is the boatman's marriage bed. Here, in this little space, he was born, and he will one day die. No simpler existence can be imagined. The boatman's life is stripped of all the complex comforts with which we have surrounded ourselves at the price of contentment. He works and lives hard, but he has not heard of hire purchase agreements, while the collectors of light and telephone accounts, rates and taxes know him not. Cleanness in such cramped quarters means unremitting labour. There can be no half measures, and the canal folk are either scrupulously clean or unbelievably squalid. On investigation, the latter class turn out to be a family off the land, the new poor without pride, who are the product of the industrial cities. Of recent years, they have been extensively employed by the larger canal-carrying companies, who are finding it difficult to recruit sufficient crews from the dwindling ranks of the old, proud stock of their independent boatmen. Soon they will be an extinct race. Their traditional and graceful dress is fast disappearing. A shoddy, sameless poverty is taking its place. Not so very long ago, the boat captain wore trousers of buff corduroy or dark mock moleskin, tight-fitting but belling from the knee. These he kept in place by a broad belt, woven of such bright colours that it resembled a vivid sash. His waistcoat, too, was of corduroy or moleskin, and he wore a coat of distinctive cut with high old-fashioned lapels. I've seen one or other of these garments in use, but never the complete outfit, and only once, 10 years ago, the gay belt. The captain's wife wore a tight-waisted cotton dress of checked or sprigged pattern, the bodice most elaborately ornamented with tucks or smocking, and the angle-length skirt very full with pleats. Her feet was protected by black boots lacing to the calf. In cold weather she would drape a shawl around her shoulders or over her head, but in the summer she would don the most wondrous black sub-bonnet, more closely resembling the mantillas of Spain than the simple bonnet of the English countrywoman. Man is usually conservative in fashion, but curiously enough, on the canals, the position seems to be reversed, for it is the women who cling more tenuously to the traditional class. It is the women who cling more tenuously to their traditional dress. I have seen many wearing their distinctive dresses and shawls, and even the sunbonnet is not quite yet extinct. I had thought that this was another item on the list of old and gracious things which had gone forever, until one warm summer evening when I was working on Cressy, an unfamiliar Warwickshire canal boat passed by. The woman who stood at the tiller might have floated serenely through a century. She had on the typical tight-waisted dress, the full skirt swinging gracefully to her every movement, and to my wonder and delight, she was wearing her black bonnet. Rows of tucks made a dark halo over her head, and from the gathered crown a broad-filled wimple fell wide and low over her shoulders. Her vital gypsy face and gold earrings could have found no finer fitting could have found no more fitting frame. A little group of women from the cottages on Factory Street stood gossiping by the drawbridge, undistinguished in their drab and cheap mass-produced clothes. She was poorer than they, yet possessed a grace and dignity that seemed almost regal. The ubiquitous wireless set has become almost universal in boat cabins, and is the boatman's only link with the modern world. He cannot read newspapers, which is no small loss to him, and he seldom has time or inclination for the cinema. Like our rural ancestors, with their country songs, festivals and dances, he too has to provide his own amusement, than which there is no healthier stimulant for talent. As a result, many boatmen are self-taught musicians, and I have found nearly every boat on the Oxford Canal carried a melodeon, a concertina, or an accordion. What's a melodeon? I've not heard of a melodeon. Often at night time I would hear the familiar strains of Daisy Bell or Two Lovely Black Eyes floating over the water from a cabin of a moored boat. Needless to say, Herbert Tooley had become proficient in repairing these instruments, and I looked on one evening while he dexterously fixed a new key spring to a melodeon belonging to John Harwood of the Searchlight. While he worked, the old boatman talked, his unhurried rhythmic speech as smoothing as a Gregorian chant. He described graphically his own journey in one of them motley cars, whose speed struck him as being out of reason, so great that it fair took the breath out of him. He then went on to relate an encounter he had with a local policeman, a story I shall never forget because it was such a perfect example of the boatman's simple yet shrewd philosophy. It happened early one morning that the policeman was crossing the Brackley Road bridge as the Searchlight passed beneath the... It happened early one morning as the policeman was crossing the Brackley Road bridge as the Searchlight passed beneath, bound for Oxford. He was a very young policeman, and seeing the old man placidly ensconced at the tiller of his slow-moving boat, he leant over the parapet and called sarcastically, "Now then, don't you be in too much of a hurry." He had not reckoned with old Jack, however. "If no one went no faster than I do," came the sonorous reply from the canal, "there'd be a sight less trouble in this world, and what's more, young man, you'd be out of a job, like as not." Even old Jack, wise as he was, cannot realise what a volume of truth lay in those few words. And that was chapter 5. Let's have a pause there. Let's see how everybody is doing this morning. Good morning, Richard, says Philip Hammond. Good morning to you. My live text sometimes stutters too, says Turbo Stream. With all the extra traffic, I feel that the net is under greater stress and therefore the problems. Yeah, I actually had problems getting online this morning, funnily enough. Good morning, Rita. Good morning, Diane. I like the air of invertebrate tea drinkers. Yes, no backbone. How about that? I'm late. Good morning. Good morning, Michael. No, Mark. Sorry, I will write 200 lines. I must not miss Mr. Vobes. Well done. I'll have them on my desk by tomorrow morning, please. I think you'll be okay. Passing the thumbs up in a way would be nice. Melodian is a button. Is a button. Which is the one? Because you get the upright one that is quite big, don't you? And then you get the sort of that one that's just like this, that you do this with, rather than the bigger one. You know what I mean? A melodian is like an accordion, except you blow into it. Do you? A melodian is a type of organ. Oh, all right, okay. Didn't know that. Good morning, Jim. From Australia. Good morning to you. Good day there. Good day there, Cobber. As they apparently say in Australia, and I'm sure that's not true, and I'm sure that was a terrible accent. But it's lovely to have you with us. Right, we're going to go on to chapter 6, Bells and Beer. This is called. When my work was unavoidably held up, or the boatyard workshop was shut down at the weekends, I found time to explore Banbury and the country district around it, discovering beneath the workday surface the old life of the town, which has survived the combined onslaughts of the Civil War and the Industrial Revolution. Cromwell and his Puritans ravaged the town with exceptional severity, pillaging the beautiful Gothic church so effectively that it was afterwards demolished. A graving of it hangs in the vestry of the present church, a pompous structure in the Palladian style, designed by a contemporary of Wren, a style that commemorates the birth of that self-conscious intellectualism which first scorned tradition. The local stone does not respond to this conceit, as it did to the simple but inspired hands of the Gothic craftsman, and the church is as empty of feeling and faith as a mausoleum. I climbed to the top of the tower with the young churchwarden, and together we leant over the balustrade while he pointed out various landmarks, and we discussed the architectural merits of old buildings which we both knew. On this subject he was remarkably well informed, and it was gratifying to discover in so young a man an interest in the past so rare and so sincere. Below us lay the town, sprawling untidily across the broad valley of the Cherwell, and it was easy to trace its growth from the nucleus of old buildings clustered around the market square to the red rash of modern suburbia which had broken out on the western slopes along the Oxford Road. From this high vantage point, the canal assumed a more important place, for it was possible to follow its course, a broad silver ribbon winding through the meadows by the river, long after the roads out of town had been lost to sight. Meanwhile, inside the tower, 2 perspiring individuals from a local firm of watchmakers were busy engaged in winding the church clock. This was no mean feat, for no less than 4 great weights had to be raised from the base of the tower. These operated the movement, the quarter chime, the strike, and the carillon. The last was installed in commemoration of Victoria's Jubilee, and interested me greatly because although I had heard the carillons of Durdsley in the South Cotswolds and of the bell tower of Evesham, I had never before seen the mechanism. The movement was similar to that of a child's music box, being operated by a revolving fibre drum studded with brass pins, which tripped the spring and cam returned bell cranks that were connected to the bell's clapper by cables. When it was desired to change the tune, the drum could be moved laterally along the spindle so that another set of pegs were brought into action. Unfortunately, the Banbury carillon was in a sorry state of repair, many of the pegs being worn or broken, so that only 2 of the original 6 tunes were still playable. I was lucky to see it at work, for in order to conserve its failing energies, it was only set up to play twice during the day. We watched and waited until the clock, ponderously ticking, crept to the hour and tripped the release. Then the old machine came to life with a most prodigious whirring and jangling of cables, and high overhead the bells rang out. There is a great serenity in the sound of a carillon, especially if it be heard distantly on the windless evening of high summer or upon the hills. Then this measured repetition of simple notes, voicing the passing of time, seems also to express that unhurried, unshakable community which is the very essence of country life. I hope that the Banbury carillon will not fall silent, but it will be an even sorrier day if that tradition which it voices, albeit brokenly, should perish. The bells of Banbury were cast by successive generations of rural craftsmen at a long-vanished foundry in the neighbouring village of Charkham. One can imagine what an undertaking the casting of the big tenor must have been, how all the villagers were agog for news that the cast had been successful, and eager to hear the bell's first deep, sonorous note. The Banbury men are great bell-ringers, and the records of past ringings of grandsire Triples hang around the belfry walls, together with a very perfect set of handbells. The vandalism of the Puritans was inspired by misguided idealism and the understandable revolt against the autocracy of the Church. The Second Revolution is more tragic because it lacks any ideal whatsoever. The brewers who have despoiled the old inns of Banbury and the chain store mongers who have defaced the ancient houses with their chromium and plate glass front shops have been actuated solely by the aim of money-making. I didn't read that very well. The English inn holds a place in the life of the village or the country town as important as the church. For generations it has been the hub about which the vigorous life of the rural community revolved. It has been the poor man's parliament and platform, his playground and his solace after labour. It is an institution. It is an institution which the milk bar, the cinema, and the social club can never replace. But the brewers have transformed it into a sordid drink shop as characterless as their liquor. The Banbury inns were particularly an unhappy example. Old gables that have been covered with drab pebble dash or stucco, and further disfigured by glaring signs which proclaimed the beer, not the house, while their interiors either displayed a featureless modernity or more frequently languished in the chill bleakness of pretentious Victorian mahogany and fly-blown aspidistras. Only at one a magnificent pair of oak doors beneath the courtyard archway remain to speak eloquently of the past. If, in some more enlightened future time, the havoc wrought by the commercialised age comes to be assessed, the brewers will face a heavy charge. The shops have not suffered so hardly. A number still retain their old bow windows, especially in the bewildering maze of alleyways between High Street and Parson Street, while above many an example of modern shop fitting, the original upper windows of the 15th century houses gaze down upon the busy street like wise old eyes, their carved dripstones like placid brows above them. Apparently that's all changed now because there's a whacking great modern... We were talking to Fran from Floating Our Boat, who was telling us about Tooley's Yard and how there's a great big shopping centre built all around the old yard, which is fascinating. So this was 1944, of course. Banbury is at its best on market day, especially on a winter's evening when the square is filled with stalls, each with its flickering... Oh, here's a word I don't know how to pronounce. I'm going to spell this for you. Naphtha, naphtha flare, rather, with its flickering naphtha flare, which casts such a magical leaping light upon the pyramids of oranges and apples that they glow like enchanted fruits of the... Here we go. Here's that word. Hesperides. Did I get it right? As opposed to Hesperides. Hesperides. Like the enchanted fruits of the Hesperides. I was glad to find that they still held open market, for too many have been banished from streets and squares that have seen their booths for centuries and have been condemned to gloomy market halls where they lose their vagabond charm, to become a species of multi-store where the curbside peddler and the ferocious cheapjack find no place. 2 markets a week supply the old and the new life of the town. The first, held on a Thursday, is the larger and caters, as it's always done, for the rural district of North Oxfordshire. Brightly painted mowers, ploughs and reapers are pushed onto the curbside before the ironmonger's shop, the better to catch the eyes of likely buyers. In one corner of the square, protesting chickens, great baskets of eggs and golden farm butter are sold to the highest bidder by the voluble auctioneer. Around him stand groups of gaitered farmers and their plump, bustling wives, filling the air with the murmur of their rich country dialect. The Saturday market is very different. Here come the wives of the men from the factories, with their contents of Friday night's pay envelopes, and theirs is a discordant, clipped speech of Birmingham. They crowd round the Jew vendors of shoddy clothing and gaudy ornaments, clutching their string bags and shrilly admonishing their grubby children. One day I watched a curbside peddler who, with the aid of a very second-hand aluminium saucepan, was demonstrating the infallibility of a cold solder he was hawking. He was a spare, grey-haired figure in his 60s, dressed in a cloth cap and shabby blue raincoat. His harangue drew little attention, so that he presently fell into packing his wares into a dog-eared suitcase, muttering bitterly to himself on the inconsistency of customers. He'd been in the game all his life, he said, adding morosely that the markets were not what they had once been, particularly in the south and west of England. He only ran one line at a time, and had been hawking his solder for the past 9 years, with enough success to earn a living. Time was when he roamed the whole of England for 12 months of the year, but now he was growing old. He had settled down in Northampton with the best wife a man could have, and there he spent the winter months, only visiting local markets just to keep his hand in. When the warm days came round, he confessed that he still felt the urge to wander, and in a fortnight, he said, he could be away once more, travelling the market towns of Yorkshire and Durham before crossing the moors to Cumberland. I have never used the tube of solder, which was the price of this conversation, but I consider that sixpence was a small fee for a talk with a travelling tinker. And that was chapter 6. There we go. Just get my eyes back to normal. I say eyes, my eye. My eye. Apparently, it's a reed organ. Are we still talking about melodeon there? It's a reed organ or American organ that developed on the harmonium. Oh, right. Oh, okay. Melodeon is an organ, except you blow into it. All right. Oh, yeah, we left you there. Just looking. I have a Diamond Jubilee commemoration plate of Queen Victoria, says Rita Loy. Have you? I bet that's lovely. Mark Doe McLeod says, I've seen... hang on, I'm going to move this over here because I can see it a bit better. I've seen the octagonal organ turbo stream being played by one musician of the famous Cocoa Nutters of Buckup in Lancashire, the last of the black-faced Morrismen. They always build around old buildings and ruin it forever. Yes, that's very true. You nearly said gated farters. Yes. Yeah, well, it's not easy reading live with people watching you and only having sort of read the chapter beforehand. It's not easy. J.W. Harville, good morning to you. Very nice to see you. Here we go. I don't know how do you pronounce it. It's naphtha is a flammable liquid hydrocarbon mixture. Mixtures labelled naphtha have been produced from natural gas, condensates, petroleum, and distillates. I've got the mug. Hello, Julie says, hello, I'm late again. I got to try and see how you pronounce this word. Let's go to Google and see if Mr. Google can give us a pronunciation. Where's my keyboard? We will get the pronunciation.
Naphtha.
Oh, right. Naphtha. Thank you. Naphtha. So I was kind of right. Naphtha. What was that other word? Hesdidrobes. I still can't. I did get it right. Hesdidrobes. Why is it? So when I was young, I couldn't say the word hospital. I just could not say the word hospital, and it would always come out as hospable. And this is another one. I can't even find it. Where is it written down? It's Hesrides or something, and I rubbish at it. Just rubbish. Can't find it now. I thought it was down near the bottom somewhere. Oh well. Not to worry. Don't worry, as my mum would say. How are we doing? 10:10. Hesperides, thank you. Hesperides, thank you very much. I did get it, though, at the time. It seems to be much like coal oil, Richard, and the form dispelling past oil too. Very noxious. It does sound very noxious, doesn't it? This is just a page and a half, so shall we do the next one? I haven't pre-read this one, so I'm doing this blind. Chapter 7, 4 houses. Not 4 candles, 4 houses. In my wanderings farther afield, I came upon 4 magnificent examples of the English country house. They made a striking contrast, not merely of architectural style and type, but of the typical vicissitudes of fortune that had overtaken them of recent years. The first was Compton Wynyates, surely one of the most perfect specimens of Tudor domestic architecture in the country, possessing the added advantage of a secluded and flawless setting in the natural cup of the Edgehill Scarp. It looks over the Warwickshire Vale to westward, and is sheltered upon the other 3 sides of slopes by verdant parkland studded with great trees. It was on a fine spring evening that I came along the narrow road which skirts the southern rim of this natural amphitheatre, and it was within almost incredulous wonder that I first saw the great house glowing below me like a rosy jewel laid upon green velvet. For the trees were casting long fingers of shadow across the grass, and the walls of the house, and the walls of the house, the many turrets, gables, and tall twisted chimneys, absorbed the light of the westerning sun, as only old Warwickshire brickwork can. It was evident that Cromwell Wynyates was fortunate in its owner. For not only was the fabric in excellent repair, but it was surrounded by a sea of smooth-shaven lawns, while the terrace garden on the south front was a marvel of topiary work. The small stone church in the corner of the grounds was the only other evidence of man's handiwork visible, so that this still, sequestered place seems to have become an island outside time. I should not have felt surprised if an Elizabethan gallant in gay hose and slashed doublet had suddenly appeared in the yew walk, or a cavalier in cloak and plume ridden out through the great doorway from the central court. Gracious Compton Wynyates resembles a court favourite of ready charm, a long, low building slumbering amidst gardens with no thought but beauty and peace. Broughton Castle, on the other hand, is a grim old warrior with little time for airs and graces. It has always been a Protestant stronghold, and it was here, in a secluded upper room, that the Cromwellians hatched the plot which plunged England in civil war. As I walked over the moat bridge and through the forbidding stone gatehouse which guards the only approach, I thought that they could have chosen no more fitting place in which to plan violence and overthrow kings. The stone of which the house is built is of sterner medium than the warm brick, and has been employed to more austere purpose on the site of an older fortified dwelling house whose ruins are still visible. From the edge of the encircling moat, tall gables soar upward in a compact, powerful mass, their stone-mullioned windows looking down sombrely at their reflections in the dark water where swans float among the lilies. After the polished elegance of Compton Wynyates, there seems to be an atmosphere of neglect about Broughton. The lawn before the house was untrimmed, and the only guardian of the gate was an elderly gander who regarded me askance out of the corner of a bright blue eye and hissed suspiciously. One would make a perfect setting for a Shakespearean comedy, but the other is an incarnation of Poe's House of Usher, particularly when the tall, rook-haunted trees beside the moat are bare of leaf and the dead water lies still under a darkening winter sky. Sulgrave, some miles east of Banbury in the direction of Northampton, came next. It is typical of the smaller Northamptonshire manor house, simply and graciously built of stone in a style closely akin to the Cotswold, although lacking the latter's finer graces. Today it might have been an obscure farmhouse, had it not cradled the Washington family. For this reason, greatness has been thrust upon it. The Stars and Stripes floats from a flagpole on the lawn, and the whole interior has been turned into a museum of the period, with a thoroughness and good sense of showmanship which are characteristically American. Sulgrave is fortunate in possessing a custodian who combines great enthusiasm and sympathy with exceptional knowledge and good taste. For the house is a treasury of all those naturally lovely things that were once part of everyday life to the self-sufficient rural community which Sulgrave once housed. It was with a curious blend of wonder and sadness that I went from room to room. Wonder at the beauty that crowded upon the eye at every turn. Sadness because that beauty, for all the consummate showmanship, was only the hollow image of its former self, because the hands and the spirit which once breathed life into it had gone, perhaps never to return. I was reminded of Yeats's Golden Bird. Here we go, I've got to read poetry now, and I'm crap at reading poetry. Such a form as Grecian goldsmiths make, of hammered gold and gold enamelling, to keep a drowsy emperor awake, or to set upon a golden bough to sing to lords and ladies of Byzantium, of what is past or passing or to come. Make of that what you will. I had rather see one simple painted can in Mr. Tooley's workshop than all the wealth of Sulgrave. There is a poor spark of still living tradition. One is a poor spark of still living tradition. The other an embalmed splendour. In the search of the last house, I came to Roxton, and I have yet to come to a comelier village east of the Cotswolds. It hangs on the slopes of a little valley, and though the main road from Banbury to Stratford-on-Avon touches the fringe of it at the top of the slope, the village has suffered little harm. The old main street runs along the valley bottom, an uneven rank of thatched stone cottages whose gardens are a riot of blossom when I walk down it on a drowsy afternoon. The old main street runs through the valley bottom, an uneven rank of thatched stone cottages whose gardens were a riot of blossom when I walked down it. Why do you not seem to finish the sentence here? On a drowsy afternoon. That's very irritating. The old main street runs along... Oh, okay, I see how it's read. The old main... Sorry, I'm just correcting myself here, but I want to read it right. The old main street runs along the valley bottom, an uneven rank of thatched stone cottages whose gardens were a riot of blossom when I walked down it a drowsy afternoon in the early evening. It's very easy to sort of to put the stress in the wrong place. At the end of it was a gateway to Roxton Abbey, and passing through I came upon Tragedy in the Midst of Peace. The great house was of octorous stone. The great house of octorous stone lay empty, the shuttered windows staring blindly at the fussy scarlet tractor that was hauling timber from the park across the drive, and at the man who was moving with a scythe that had once been the rose garden. One bush of crimson roses still bloomed in wild, unpruned profusion, and here the bees were busy. Their humming mingled with the whir of the mowing machine from a nearby paddock, and lapped about by these soft summer sounds. It was easy to believe that Roxton was not dead but sleeping. Yet, walking round the flagged terrace, where dandelions and docks were sprouting, I felt that the tide of life had left it, just as it had left the butter patters, the wool comb, and the spit in the Sulgrave kitchen. I'm sorry, I read that a bit crap, but hey, I read it. There we go. Hesperides. Oh, yes, so Hesperides, that's right. Must remember to upload a video today, says Turbo Stream. Yes, you must. You remember that. Great. You're great, Richard. Thank you very much. Unwarranted, I'm sure. Google Maps come up with various designs, including foot pump organ. I wonder if those houses, see, that's the thing. One could check up on those houses and see how they look today. Canal or Tudor Grammar School? What are you asking where we should go? Let's go to the Tudor Grammar School. That would be quite interesting. Not that I'm fed up with canals or anything by any means, but that would be interesting. A Tudor Grammar School. I'm assuming a Tudor Grammar School is either going to be of stone or it's going to be timber framed. That would be interesting. I guess my mum used to play the whatever that is, Meldonium. Oh, Meldonium, just because we always called it an accordion. Ben Reed, presumably it's the naphtha in camphor, naphthalene, that makes the pong a bit in mothballs. Ah, right. Is that what it is? Oh my God, Richard, don't look now, but the bovine 007 is right behind. I have no idea what you mean. Byzantium was an ancient Greek city in the classical antiquity that became known as Constantinople in the late antiquity, and it's now Istanbul. Yes, Byzantium. I read a whole load of Hugh Braun, who was an architect and wrote about architectural things, or was an architectural historian, I suppose. Has written a series of books, one of which is about churches and church architecture, and he talks about the Byzantium form of church, which was what we call the cruciform now, but and in England, when churches came to the UK, there were two types of church in the early days. There was the Byzantium church, which was the primitive, basically a tower with what we would now call a cruciform, but it wasn't really cruciform at the time. It was just a tower. And the concept was that the Byzantium idea was height, being that you had your church, which was a small, humble timber thing in Britain anyway, and of course over there it was in stone, and you built it high so that it would tower above everywhere, and it was this sort of, pointing up to the sky and pointing to God, and it was the most substantial building in the village and all round. But because it was this shape, and you had the altar and the rituals and what have you going at one side, not enough people could see, so they would build these out of the original tower. They would build these what we now call transepts, but they weren't transepts then. They built outwards so that the chancel, what we think of as the chancel, extended a bit, and then the transepts came out a bit, and consequently, this cross shape formed, and that was the Byzantium design. But from the Celtic side, sort of from Ireland, I think, and then Wales, came across which went round the country much quicker and more so in the early days, was the nave and chancel going to the east, and then in the 14th century, the tower at the end. And so that's why sometimes you come across churches where the tower is still in the middle, because that's the crucifix thing, the Byzantium thing, and then the Celtic version, which has the tower at the west end, but came much later. And then they went through a period later on where they extended the chancel. And sometimes you see chancels that look like they're in two stages. And they kind of go boop, boop. Because they wanted to keep the mystery of the rituals further away from the hoi polloi. If I've remembered all that right. Byzantium, yes, that's right. Thanks, Richard says, noted, and we'll upload soon. Very good. These chapters really go fast. They're very short chapters, so 2 or 3 of them are great. More quality reading, bedtime reading, especially in 1930. Sydney, thank you, Jim. Much appreciated. Very tuneful, Linda. Talking of grammar schools and the Cromwellian era, my grammar school, says Ben Reeve, was named after John Hampden, who was killed at the Battle of Shalgrove in Oxfordshire during the English Civil War. Oh, how interesting. Westminster Cathedral is in a Byzantine in style. Yeah, I guess that's right. Wow, the video and speech don't match YouTube. Are we are we out of sync this morning? Going for a short walk. Thanks, Richard. See you tonight. Enjoy your walk. Rusty Boat says a book is an arrangement of 26. A book is an arrangement of 26 phonetic symbols, 10 numbers, and 8 punctuation marks, and we cast our eyes over it and envision the eruption of Mount Vesuvius or the Battle of Waterloo. Yes, I suppose that's true. They are amazing amount of ancient buildings in Istanbul. People have built apartments into. I was watching a documentary on it. Ah, okay. Really? Mine is MDM. Blah, blah, blah. Right, cool. Thank you very much for coming along. And we will do the same again tomorrow morning, Sunday morning. This will be our sermon. Narrowboat chapters, whatever chapters we've got up to. Thank you for all the chat, and I will try and pre-read the 3 chapters tomorrow so that we get there. It depends on how long they are, really. But anyway, thank you very much. It's been great fun. I'm thoroughly enjoying this book. I think that was a lucky choice. Off to upload, then go to a bike ride. See you all later. That's it. I've got to record a video for tomorrow, and I might get out on my bike too today to try and get out of the house. Mark Donny McLeod says, I'm having trouble with my Windows 7. I shall try to reload 10, but it's not playing nice. Oh, I don't envy you sitting there fiddling with bloody computers. It's such a boring job. Take care, Lisa. Thanks for watching, and hope you get the rest of the night's sleep. And Julie, thank you. See you tomorrow. Never could understand when anyone wrote a song about it. What was that? The Istanbul thing. Kirk Vonnegut is the best writer ever. Never heard of him. The 4 lads back in the 50s. Wasn't there a song about Istanbul is now Constantinople or whatever. Anyway, I'm going. Take care. Nice to talk to you all. Thank you very much for coming along, and I'll see you later on or tomorrow or whatever. Bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.